Everybody, happy Monday. Hope you had a great 4th of July holiday. As always, we will do our weekly Q&A. So I got 5 questions in front of me. The first two are actually AI related, so I'll answer them in order, but they're pretty related. And then talking about leads, a little bit about executive presence, and lastly, how do you deliver results as an executive? So first up, we have this offer question, and so what was said then was, so AI, obviously hot right now. Like, should I try to get some AI certifications? Any other way you'd suggest I get involved? Right. So this is somebody who wants to kind of start to get into the AI world. And the basic answer to this question goes back to the question that we always ask, which is, how can you solve my problem? Right. That's the frame that you want to use whenever you think about your value proposition, your brand, however you want to think about it, is to get that next role, you have to solve their problem. So, what we're trying to say here is, how can I convince you, Mr. and Mrs. Hiring Manager, that I can solve your problem when that problem is related to AI? So that's what we're trying to do when we think about, AI certifications or anything related to AI. And so there's a hierarchy of that, right? The best way is if you've done it, if it's a core part of your job, which means that if it's not part of your job, the best strategy is actually to find a way to kind of get it to be part of your job. And so you can do that by effectively volunteering in certain ways to do a little POC on AI integration with your existing software, whatever you do. You could do, if there's an AI task force, if there's something related to on the job, because if you've done it as part of your responsibilities, it comes under on your resume, like it would be a bullet under your job. That's by far the best because that is the closest to actual execution, even if it's proxy, right? We did a research, we did market study on AI in our space. It's not exactly like you built an AI tool, but it's very, very close, right? Secondary would be certifications that prove knowledge, right? And that would be certifications that require like a test or some other proof of knowledge, right? And again, for the levels that we talk about here, meaning sort of director and above, that execution isn't really the point. The point is, do you understand how it works? But if you want a certification that is helpful, if it is, again, a classic, AWS certification or something like that that has an execution component. The thing that doesn't help from a value proposition standard is like courses, like a Coursera, or even like going to Harvard for, executive AI overview or something. The courses don't help from a value proposition, meaning I do not value as a hiring manager. Basically, people do not value the coursework because there's no real assessment of, did you learn anything, right? Even if you took the test is not practical knowledge. And so, should you do that? Well, for yourself, right? I still encourage you to take courses, learn a lot, but it is for your own knowledge so you can think about how to apply it in the space. But that's just not going to get you very far when it comes to a value proposition that someone's going to hire you for, right? So if it's a value proposition, you need to solve their problem. You need to get very, very close, as close as you can to execution. And again, on the job, right? Because if you did it yourself, if you, oh yeah, I sort of set up a AI bot or did whatever on my own time, that's good, but I have no context around what you did, and that's very low level. And so does it help? Maybe, but the job is to integrate it into a large enterprise, right? Something like that. So again, anything you can do to get it on your resume as part of your job will be much more valuable than anything you can do in your own time. This is for you. This is for your knowledge. You can talk intelligently about this space, right? But that's kind of, you know, will it help? Knowledge is always good, but if you want it to help from a value proposition, you want it to be attached to execution in a role that somebody would say, okay, that's a role that I respect and I would, take that into consideration, right? So that's when you think about it, like what would help? The second question is for somebody who wants to get into AI and any suggestions on where to start. And so if you're in this space and you're like, oh, I got to get, AI is everywhere now. I got to get into the AI space. That's like saying I want to get into tech, right? For those of us in tech, you know that you can't just quote unquote get into tech. There are 15 different varieties of jobs. You can go super hardcore. You can do sort of infrastructure and networking and SRE and that kind of stuff. You can do kind of coding and engineering. You can do product stuff. You could do marketing and sales stuff. There's this whole swath and saying, I want to get into tech. Basically, immediately would tell somebody, okay, you actually don't know a lot about tech because you can't just get into tech. You need to pick a lane, right, and develop some skills and go from there. Think of AI as the same thing. So saying I want to get into AI is a little bit too generic and probably means you don't or you haven't thought through the ecosystem that is AI and where you might fit, right? And again, so very similar to the tech stack where you have super low infrastructure to customer applications, UIs, and stuff like that. There is the AI sort of stack equivalent, right? And so once again, there is a lot of hardcore infrastructure and networking and things like that, data centers and cooling and all that, that is very, very AI specific. So the same stack applies. But even from the product space, right, there are foundational models and data scientists, like people who are building and training the hardcore models. So that's a very, very niche skills, very detailed skills. This uses the OpenAIs and Anthropics and all that kind of stuff. Like, are you going to work there, right? Or are you going to work on sort of more the classic product? And once again, there's like augmentation, which is how can I use AI in my company to do data analysis, risk analysis, help with all our operations, right? So that's a space. Are you going to build it in a product as an augmentation service to something you already do? So this is product development with an AI flavor. Or are you trying to create an actual AI service that people will use directly, right? And so once again, there's this wide variety of AI opportunities similar to tech opportunities. And so if you're thinking about getting into the AI space, the first question is, where are you going to play? Right? Because you need to develop some expertise, you need to develop some knowledge, and you can't just learn AI. It's too big, right? You need to sort of pick a lane, and then you say, oh, I'm a specialist in helping companies figure out how to integrate AI into their product offerings. Okay, that's something. Or I'm here to help you build a customized model for your specific industry, building off the foundation models, but I specialize in doing a banking model on top of these things. I mean, whatever it is, right? But you want to think about where in that stack do you live? All right, so that's kind of the offer. Those are questions around AI. Changing gears a little bit. The next one is around leads, right? So potential opportunities. I have a good role I enjoy, but got called by a recruiter at a top named firm. Okay, any advice on how to make that decision? So this is one where, okay, all is well, you're doing well, and then you get called from somebody who is, a employer of note, right? So you're like, wow, I could work for this company. And so, I mean, there's really no difference in looking at this scenario than the general scenario, other than it's going to be harder for you to move because you've got a really good space, right? And what I always recommend when you're in these kind of tough scenarios and good choices is rather than what's my next job, think about your next 2 to 3 jobs. So maybe go 5 years out beyond. Where do you want to be? What do you want to do? Because oftentimes things get clear, right? Well, I'm working on this tech and they work on that tech, or there's a little bump or whatever it is. Longer term, it's easier to see growth opportunities, industries, et cetera, right? If you flash forward 5 years or even more, potentially 10 years, where do you want to be in your career? And that's the easiest way to differentiate whether this is going to be valuable, right? Big names are great, but they tend to be big names. Everybody wants to work there. They're super competitive. So if you want to grow your career, that might actually be harder because you're now in a much more concentrated environment, right? Where do you want to go there for a couple of years, get some experience, and then move on to a sort of smaller firm or a different firm? Maybe. But the differentiation comes with the long-term thinking. So if you're kind of stuck on, do I stay, do I go? Just expand your horizon. And oftentimes that will give you a better sense of the choices that you're making. Because ultimately, you're looking for upsides and downsides. Okay, there are good things going over here, and there's going to be not so good things, or there's going to be unknowns. Right? But zoom out a little bit. That will often give you the clarity you need to figure out whether this is the right move for you. Okay. Next up, we have an executive presence question of, so how does networking help improve executive presence? And I mean, everything's correlated, right? When we talk about, executive presence, executive results, executive relationships. So this is asking, okay, I want to build my executive presence. How does networking help? And it helps in a couple ways, right? So the more you network, the more people will see you, which will basically test your executive presence, right? Executive presence is a collective assessment by a set of other executives on, are you effectively one of us, right? Do you come across as an executive? The more you network, the more feedback you're going to get based on the way they talk, the questions they ask, how they interact with, like, do they see you as a sort of fellow executive at the same level, right? So that's kind of number one is, okay, it's a great test. That's how it helps. Number two is that one of the executive jobs, right, is to create new opportunities across the enterprise. Now let's go to the top. If you get CEO and then you have the sort of heads underneath, head of technology, head of product, head of marketing, head of sales, right? The job of this group is to work together to come up with new ideas on how to make the company better, new products, new markets, etc., which means you have to partner, right? And to partner, you need to know all those people and you need to float ideas and test them out and have an idea funnel and all that kind of stuff so that you are creating new opportunities. You can't do that if you don't have a network, right? So the broader your network, the more interesting connections you make, the more ideas you come up with, the easier it is to fulfill that part of the executive presence, which is, are you a net idea creator? How big are those ideas? How impactful and how real, right? So networking, the number two reason to do the networking for executive presence is because it is a necessary ingredient for you to create those ideas that will demonstrate that you can operate at the executive level, right? So hopefully that makes sense. But bottom line is you do need to do it, right? It is a critical part of being an executive is networking to build relationships and create ideas. So do it even if you're not super comfortable. It's not your favorite thing to do. It's just an important thing to do. So just do it. Right? That would be my advice there. Okay. And last question here is on the results side. Okay. Any tips for how to prioritize my time as I transition in the executive role? I'm overloaded with too many day-to-day tasks. And this is classic. This is the standard problem. And again, just to frame the problem for you is the beginning of your career, your execution, right? Get stuff done. Whether that's small task, medium task, projects, programs, etc. That's the beginning of the career. Up here on the executive side, it's what do we do? How do we allocate our resources? Where do we go? It's the setting of the direction and aligning the resources to get there. And then there's this middle band, which does both. And that's what we talk about here, right? It's that sort of senior manager, director, senior director, junior VP, depending on what your company is. That band, you have to do both, right? You have to make sure it all gets done. Everybody still expects you to be on top of things. And then, you're trying to move into that executive rank. So this is where the reframes become very, very important, right? And one example of what you can do in this scenario is delegate. Okay, that's not exciting, right? Everybody says delegate. Perfect. So what is the real secret to delegation? The real secret to delegation is how you think about what you are doing, right? And what you are doing, and this is the insight that's really important, is what you are doing is you are starting to change it from an execution problem to a talent problem. Okay. And so, what I mean by that is if you think about the way that a manager delegates, right? A manager delegates to their staff to get something done. If it doesn't get done, the manager's like, oh, okay, I got to fix this. I got to figure that out. I did the wrong thing. I've got to make it right. Okay. If an executive delegates it and it doesn't get done, they delegated it to the wrong person. It's a talent management person. They thought this person could handle it. The person couldn't handle it. They need to grow that person or they need to basically find somebody else to do it. So the thing didn't get done. In the executive, it was a talent problem. Now, should the thing get fixed? Yes, it should, but that's actually not the focus. The focus is on picking the person, right? And so this is a mindset shift that is very hard to make. It was one of the hardest things that I had to do right when I went through my career because you have to accept that it's not getting done to the level of quality that you are used to, which for some of us, myself included, is a very hard thing to let go. Right? But I know I could do this. And it kind of came out like this. And the difference is the executive mindset is you have something, it doesn't get done. You talk to your boss, what do you say? The boss knows this thing didn't get done. Well, boss, sorry, give me 24 hours, I'll go fix it. Like I'm on top of this. That's a manager slash director response. The executive response would be, all right, boss, don't worry, I'm on this. I gave this as an opportunity because I probably told you before, you set up the scene. I gave this opportunity for John because I wanted to see if he could lead in this space and grow his. Obviously he didn't nail it this first time. I'm going to be working with him, or I'm going to transition somebody else in, or I'm going to do something else with the talent to fix this problem. I'm not going to fix the actual problem. I'm going to fix the resource allocation associated with the problem. And if you notice, that's a very different solution, right? The first solution is, oh, don't worry, I'm going to get done. I'm going to get this thing updated. I'm going to get fixed. I'm going to execute, execute, execute. The other side is, I made a resource allocation talent development issue. That's my problem. I made the wrong call. I didn't provide the right structure. So that's what I'm going to fix. I'm either going to get them training, I'm going to have somebody else in there. I'm going to fix the systemic issue, not the execution issue, right? And so this is one of the keys to mindset is, as you move to the executive, your tools for solving things become different. You don't solve the execution problem, you solve the system problem, which typically is talent resource allocation or environment support tools, et cetera. Right? It's a different type of solution. And that is, if I'm the big boss, right? If I'm the SVP, the managing director, the C-suite person, when I ask you what went wrong, are you here or are you here? It's one of the easiest ways for me to tell, how are you operating? Are you operating in the execution world or are you operating in the executive world, right? So obviously delegation, this is a transition. It's not super easy to do in the beginning. Take something small, but think about it as a talent challenge, and you can pre sort of set it up. Hey boss, for project X, I'm putting John in charge. I think it's a good growth opportunity for him or for Sally or whoever it is. I'm going to put them in charge, and that's my focus. I'm trying to grow them. 2 months later, it doesn't go well. Okay, I'm going to examine my talent management decisions, because as an executive, that is what I am fixing, not the fact that the quality was there and their testing processes are wrong and whatever, right? I'm fixing a different problem. So I hope that helps. But that's really, again, this executive transition, this executive mindset is, how do you start to think differently about solving problems, because your toolkit is different. It goes from execution and just doing the thing to working on the factory, on the system, resources, talent, etc. It is a different solution set. So again, if you want to move to the executive ranks, you want to start to use this in your day to day and have these conversations with your boss about the toolkit you're using to fix problems. All right, there you go. So that is all the questions I had for this week. So hopefully that was helpful. As always, drop me a DM, post a question here, and I will add it for next week. All right, have a great week, and we'll see you in the community.